The small space station floating around planet Kepler 442b was the loneliest place in the galaxy. Dr. Jiwoo Park rubbed her tired eyes and looked at her computer screen again. Down on the red planet below, strange alien creatures moved through, the dark forests like shadows. These weren't ordinary animals. They were smart, deadly hunters that could change and adapt faster than anything humans had ever seen. Jiwoo and her team had been watching these creatures for 8 long months. Every day they recorded how the beasts hunted, how they learned, how they survived. It was dangerous work, but someone had to understand these things before they became a threat to human colonies. The research station was small, just 12 scientists, living in metal rooms that hummed with the sound of life support systems. They had chosen this remote location specifically because it was far from everything else. No trade routes, no military bases, no civilian colonies, just them, the planet, and the creatures below. Dr. Hyun-Sik Lee sat at the communication desk, his face pale in the blue light of his monitors. He had been trying to contact other human settlements for hours, but the responses kept getting worse. "Contact lost with Proxima Base," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "That's the 7th colony this week." Jiwoo felt her heart sink. Proxima Base housed over 50,000 people, families, children, farmers, engineers, all gone. She walked to the observation deck and pressed her hands against the thick glass windows. In the distance, she could see bright flashes of light against the black space. Each flash meant another human world was dying. The Vorthak Empire had finally made their move. For years, human intelligence had warned that these aliens were planning something big. The Vorthak were not like humans. They were cruel, efficient, and they saw other species as nothing more than resources to be harvested. Their ships were fast, their weapons were powerful, and they showed no mercy. Jiwoo watched as another explosion lit up the darkness. Somewhere out there, people were crying for help. Children were afraid, mothers were holding their babies close, and there was nothing she could do about it. "Dr. Park," called out Dr. So-Min Kim from her workstation, "Our distress beacon isn't working. The main transmitter failed 3 days ago." Her voice was quiet, but everyone heard the fear in it. This was the worst possible news. The distress beacon was their lifeline to Earth Command. Without it, no one knew they were still alive. As far as the human military was concerned, their research station had probably been destroyed along with everything else in this sector. Jiwoo looked around at her team. They were good people, scientists who had dedicated their lives to understanding the universe. Dr. Tae-Hyun Choi was barely 25, fresh out of university with brilliant ideas about alien biology. Dr. Min Ho-yoon had 3 children back. On Earth, Dr. Hee Jin-song had turned down a comfortable job on Mars to come here and study these creatures. "We have 2 choices," Jiwoo said slowly. "We can try to fix the beacon and call for help, or we can stay hidden." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she meant. If they called for help, the Vorthak might hear them first. These aliens had technology that could track human signals across vast distances. But if they stayed quiet, they might survive long enough for human forces to retake this sector. "What about the other research stations?" asked Dr. Dong-Hyun Nam. "Station Alpha 7, the mining platform at Kepler 438. Hyun-Sik shook his head sadly. "All gone. We're picking up Vorthak communication signals from their locations now." Jiwoo made the hardest decision of her life. "We maintain radio silence," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, even though her hands were shaking. "If they think we're dead, maybe we can stay that way long enough for help to arrive." But deep down she wondered if help would ever come. The Vorthak seemed unstoppable, and humanity was running out of places to hide. 3 weeks had passed since the nightmare began. 3 weeks of watching human colonies disappear one by one from their long-range scanners. Dr. So-Min Kim had dark circles under her eyes, and her hands shook when she held her coffee cup. She spent every waking hour staring at the sensor displays, hoping to see some sign that humanity was fighting back. But there was nothing. Just silence where once there had been bustling worlds full of life. The research station felt like a tomb. Everyone whispered when they talked, afraid that somehow the aliens might hear them even through the vacuum of space. Dr. Min Ho-yoon had started writing letters to his children back on Earth, even though he had no way to send them. Dr. Hye-jin, Song barely ate anything anymore, surviving on protein bars and determination. Then, on a cold Tuesday morning, their worst fears came true. Massive shapes began appearing in the space above Kepler 442b. Not the sleek warships they had seen destroying other worlds, but something much larger and more terrifying. Huge alien vessels, each one the size of a small city, dropped out of hyperspace with flashes of blue light. "Count them," Ji-woo said quietly, though her voice barely worked. Dr. Tae-hyun Choi's fingers flew over his keyboard, his young face pale with concentration. 12 capital ships, maybe 15, and they're bringing construction equipment? So-min leaned forward, studying the sensor readings more carefully. She had been tracking alien movements for weeks now, learning to read their patterns. What she saw made her stomach turn cold. "Those aren't just warships," she whispered. "Look at the hull configurations, orbital construction platforms." The terrible truth became clear as they watched the alien fleet organize itself above their planet. The Vorthak weren't just passing through on their way to destroy more human worlds. They were planning to stay. Giant metal structures began extending from the alien ships, like mechanical flowers blooming in space. Weapon platforms, communication arrays, and something that looked like a massive factory. "They're building a permanent base," Ji-woo said, her voice hollow. "This isn't just an invasion anymore, they're colonizing our space." But that wasn't the worst part. As the days passed, the humans watched in horror as the aliens began sending ships down to the planet's surface. At first they thought the Vorthak were just setting up ground facilities. Then they realized what was really happening. The aliens were hunting. For 8 months, Ji-woo's team had studied the incredible creatures that lived on Kepler 442b. These weren't ordinary animals. They were apex predators with abilities that seemed almost magical. They could adapt to new environments within hours, change their hunting strategies to match their prey, and even communicate with each other across vast distances using methods humans barely understood. Now the Vorthak were capturing these magnificent creatures. "They're not killing them," Dr. Dong-hyun-nam observed, his voice filled with sick fascination as he watched the alien hunting parties through their telescopes. "They're taking them alive." So-min felt tears running down her cheeks as she watched a wounded stalker beast being dragged into one of the alien facilities. These creatures had become like friends to her over the months of observation. She had named some of them, learned their individual behaviors, even felt a strange connection to their alien intelligence. "They're torturing them," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Look at the energy readings from that facility. They're running experiments, they're trying to weaponize the adaptive traits." The implications were terrifying. If the Vorthak could somehow harness the creature's ability to adapt and change, they could create biological weapons that would be unstoppable. No human defense would work against an enemy that could evolve new attack methods faster than humans, could develop countermeasures. The 12 scientists huddled together in their tiny Arctic research station, hidden beneath layers of ice and metal, watching helplessly as their months of careful study turned into the foundation for humanity's destruction. They had come here to learn about these amazing creatures, but now their knowledge felt like a curse. The emergency meeting took place in the station's smallest room, barely big enough for all 12 team members to squeeze inside. The air recycler hummed loudly overhead, a constant reminder of how fragile their little bubble of life really was. Everyone looked exhausted. They had been living on emergency rations and 3 hours of sleep for weeks now. Dr. Dong-hyun-nam slammed his fist on the metal table, making everyone jump. "We can't just hide forever," he said, his voice cracking with frustration. "Every day their patrols get a little closer to our position. Yesterday, one of their scout ships passed right over the northern ridge." Ji-woo looked around at her team. These weren't soldiers. They were scientists who had signed up to study alien life, not fight a war. Dr. Tae-hyun Choi was still just a kid, barely out of university. Dr. Hye-jin Song specialized in plant biology, not combat tactics. They had no weapons except for a few emergency flare guns and some basic tools. "What do you suggest we do?" asked Dr. Subin Lee, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have no ships, no weapons, no way to contact Earth. We're 12 people against an entire alien army." Dr. Min Ho-yoon had been quiet during most of their discussions, but now he looked up from his data pad with an expression that was both excited and terrified. "I've been tracking the Vorthak patrol patterns for 2 weeks," he said, "but I've also been watching something else, the native creatures." He activated the holographic display in the center of the room, showing a 3-dimensional map of the planet's surface. Colored dots moved across the terrain, representing different species of predators and prey animals. "Look at this," Minho continued, pointing to areas where the dots seemed to cluster. "The stalker beasts are main subjects of study. They're not behaving randomly anymore. They're avoiding specific zones, the same zones where the Vorthak have set up their facilities." Dr. So-min Kim leaned forward, studying the display more carefully. After months of observation, she knew these creatures better than anyone. "That's impossible," she said. "Stalker beasts are apex predators. They don't avoid anything." "Exactly," Minho replied, "which means they understand that the Vorthak are a threat. These creatures are intelligent enough to recognize danger and adapt their behavior accordingly. They're territorial, yes, but they're also smart enough to know when they're outmatched." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. The implications were staggering. If the planet's most dangerous predators were afraid of the Vorthak, what chance did 12 human scientists have? "What are you suggesting?" Jiwoo asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. Minho took a deep breath. "We've spent 8 months learning how to track these creatures, how to predict their movements, how to understand their communication patterns. What if we could talk to them? What if we could convince them to work with us?" "That's suicide," So-min protested immediately. "These are killing machines. We've watched them tear apart prey animals twice their size. They don't have emotions or loyalty. They're pure predators." "So are the Vorthak," Dong-hyun replied grimly. "And right now, the enemy of our enemy might be our only hope." Dr. Woo-jin Park, who had been silent until now, spoke up from the corner of the room. "Even if we could somehow communicate with these creatures, what would we ask them to do? Attack? The Vorthak facilities, they'd be slaughtered." "Maybe," Minho admitted, "but they know this planet better than anyone. They know every cave, every hidden path, every weakness in the terrain. The Vorthak are building their bases in the open, relying on their technology and firepower. But technology has limitations." Jiwoo felt a strange mixture of hope and terror building in her chest. It was an insane plan, trying to form an alliance with alien predators to fight an even more dangerous alien enemy. But what other choice did they have? "We fight back," she said finally, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We use everything we know about this planet and its creatures. We can't win through firepower, but maybe we can win through intelligence." The first attack had been almost too easy. Working with a pack of 6 stalker beasts, the human team had managed to destroy 3 Vorthak supply convoys in a single night. The creatures moved like ghosts through the crimson forests, leading the humans along hidden paths that avoided all the alien sensors. When the moment was right, they struck together, humans with their improvised explosives and the stalker beasts with their razor-sharp claws and incredible speed. Dr. Jiwoo Park still couldn't believe it had worked. For 8 months, they had studied these creatures from a safe distance, never imagining they could actually communicate with them. But Dr. Min Ho-yoon had found a way, using a combination of light patterns, sound frequencies, and chemical signals, that the predators seemed to understand. The victory had felt amazing for exactly 12 hours. Then the Vorthak response began. "Incoming energy signatures," Dr. So-min Kim called out from her monitoring station, her voice tight with fear. "Multiple contacts, high altitude." Through the cavern entrance, they could see streaks of deadly light, falling from the sky like burning rain. The orbital bombardment was systematic and thorough. The aliens were targeting every place where humans might be hiding. Forests exploded into fire, mountain peaks were turned to glass, and entire valleys disappeared in clouds of superheated plasma. Deep underground, in caverns that stretched for miles beneath the planet's surface, the remaining members of the research team huddled around their equipment. Dr. Hyojin Song watched her scanner with growing horror as the bombardment pattern expanded across the planet's surface. "They're not just hitting suspected locations," she reported, her voice barely steady. They're targeting everything in a grid pattern, systematic destruction of the entire continental landmass. Dr. Tae-hyun Choi looked up from his own scanner, his young face pale in the dim light of their emergency power cells. At this rate, they'll sterilize the entire planet within 48 hours. Nothing will survive on the surface. The team had been reduced to 8 members. Dr. Dong-hyun, Nam and 2 others had been caught in the first wave of bombardment while trying to rescue trapped stalker beasts. Dr. Subin Lee had volunteered for a suicide mission to destroy a Vorthak communication relay and hadn't returned. Minho emerged from the deeper cave systems, and everyone gasped when they saw him. His left arm was completely wrapped in what looked like living tissue, a biosynthetic webbing that pulsed with its own heartbeat. The experimental symbiotic bonding he had, attempted with an alpha stalker beast, was changing him in ways none of them understood. "The process is accelerating," he said quietly, and they could all hear that his voice had changed too. There was something inhuman in the undertones now. "The bonding is killing my human cells, but it's also giving me access to their collective intelligence network." Dr. Woojin Park stepped closer, studying the strange transformation with scientific fascination despite their desperate situation. "What are you seeing? What do they know?" Minho closed his eyes, and for a moment his face took on an expression that was more predator than human. "The Vorthak primary facility is in the northern continent. It's where they're processing the captured creatures, trying to weaponize their adaptive abilities. But it's also their central command hub for the orbital bombardment." Jiwoo felt her heart racing as she understood what he was suggesting. "If we could destroy that facility, the bombardment would stop," Minho finished. "But it's suicide. The facility is protected by hundreds of guards, automated defenses and energy shields. Even with the stalker beasts helping us, we'd never make it inside." The cavern fell silent, except for the distant rumble of explosions from the surface. Everyone knew they were trapped. They could stay underground and slowly starve to death, or they could attempt one final, impossible mission. Dr. Hai-jin Song was the first to speak. "How many stalker beasts are still alive?" "Maybe 30, Minho replied. "The bombardment has killed most of the surface populations." "And how many of us are left?" 8 humans who can still fight." Jiwoo looked around at her team, scientists who had become warriors, researchers who had learned to fight alongside alien predators. They were exhausted, terrified, and completely outmatched. But they were also the only hope left for their planet and possibly for humanity itself. One final push, she decided, her voice growing stronger despite knowing she was ordering their deaths. "We take out their primary facility, all of us together, humans and stalker beasts. They had no choice. It was fight or watch everything burn." The attack began at dawn when the crimson sun cast long shadows across the Vorthak facility. 8 humans and 30 stalker beasts moved through the morning mist like ghosts, following paths that only the native creatures knew existed. Dr. Jiwoo Park felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched the massive alien base spread out before them. It should have been suicide. The Vorthak facility was enormous, a sprawling complex of metal towers and energy barriers that housed thousands of alien soldiers. Automated defense turrets swept the perimeter with deadly laser beams, and patrol ships circled overhead like mechanical vultures. Any sane military commander would have called it impossible, but Jiwoo's team wasn't a military unit. They were scientists who had spent 8 months learning everything about Vorthak technology, studying their weaknesses, understanding how their systems worked. And they had allies the aliens never expected. The stalker beasts moved first, using their natural camouflage to slip past the outer defenses. Dr. Min Ho-yoon, his arm now completely transformed by the symbiotic bonding, could somehow see through their eyes and coordinate their movements. The creatures struck the power generators, simultaneously plunging entire sections of the base into darkness. "Go, go, go," Jiwoo whispered into her communicator as her team rushed forward through the chaos. Dr. Tae-hyun Choi had spent weeks analyzing the facility's construction, looking for structural weaknesses. "Sector 7, he called out as they ran through the smoke-filled corridors. "The bioweapon labs are built on unstable support beams. If we can overload their containment systems. The team split up, each person heading for a different objective. Dr. So-Min Kim and Dr. Woo-Jin Park went after the communication arrays. Dr. Hye-Jin Song targeted the creature holding pens, trying to free any surviving stalker beasts. Ji-Woo herself headed for the command center, where she hoped to find the facility's main computer systems. The explosions started small but grew larger as the team's sabotage took effect. Emergency alarms screamed through the corridors, and Vorthak soldiers ran in all directions, trying to contain the damage. But the humans had planned for this chaos, using their months of observation to predict exactly how the aliens would respond. Structural weakness confirmed. Dr. Subin Lee's voice crackled over the communicator as a massive explosion rocked the entire facility. The bioweapon laboratories, where the aliens had been torturing and experimenting on captured creatures, erupted in cascades of fire and toxic gas. Years of research and development were destroyed in seconds. But their success came at a terrible price. As Ji-Woo reached the command center, she could hear the orbital bombardment beginning overhead. The Vorthak ships in space had realized what was happening and were preparing to destroy the entire facility rather than let it fall into human hands. Through her communicator, she heard Dr. Tae-Hyun Choi's last transmission. "Tell my family, I was brave." Then static Dr. So-Min Kim's signal went dead next, followed by Dr. Woo-Jin Park's. One by one, her team was being killed or scattered by the collapsing facility and the bombardment from above. Ji-Woo found herself alone in the wreckage of the alien command center, surrounded by sparking electronics and fallen debris. Her left leg was broken, and blood ran down her face from a head wound. But she was still alive, and the computer systems were still partially functional. With shaking fingers, she activated her emergency transmitter, the same one that had been broken for weeks, but which she had finally managed to repair using salvaged Vorthak technology. This was her chance to send one final message, though she didn't expect anyone to hear it. "This is Dr. Ji-Woo Park, Kepler 442b Research Station," she said into the device, her voice barely steady. "Transmitting Vorthak tactical analysis and weakness profiles. Their bioweapons are vulnerable to neural implant frequencies, specifically 2.4 GHz range. Their shield generators have a 30-second cycle delay. Their communication protocols use..." She continued recording everything she had learned, every weakness they had discovered, every tactical advantage that might help humanity survive. As the ceiling began to collapse around her, she kept talking, pouring 8 months of research and observation into what she knew would be her final message to Earth. The command center of the UES Indomitable was a place of controlled chaos. Admiral Yeon-Soo Kang stood at the center of it all, watching dozens of holographic displays showing the retreat of humanity's outer rim forces. Red markers indicated lost colonies, yellow ones showed evacuation zones, and green represented the few safe havens left in human space. There wasn't much green on the map anymore. The flagship Dreadnought was massive, 3 kilometers long and home to 15,000 crew members. It was humanity's most advanced warship, bristling with weapons and protected by energy shields that could withstand direct hits from nuclear missiles. But even the Indomitable felt small when compared to the Vorthak war fleets that were systematically destroying human civilization. "Admiral, incoming priority transmission," called out Commander Ji-Woo Park from his station near the communications array. His voice was tense. They had been receiving nothing but bad news for weeks, and everyone expected this to be more of the same. Yeon-Soo barely looked up from her tactical planning. The evacuation fleet was preparing to abandon the entire outer rim sector and fall back to Earth's defensive perimeter. It was a devastating retreat that would leave millions of colonists at the mercy of the Vorthak, but there was no choice. Humanity simply didn't have enough ships to defend such a vast area of space. "Can it wait?" she asked, studying the logistics reports on her screen. "We're trying to coordinate the evacuation of 17 different systems." "Ma'am, you really need to hear this," Ji-Woo insisted, his voice carrying an urgency that made everyone in the command center turn to look at him. Yeon-Soo sighed and walked over to the communications station. "Put it through the speakers." What emerged from the ship's audio system was barely recognizable as a human voice. It was weak, exhausted, and filled with static from a damaged transmitter. But the words were clear and precise, spoken by someone who knew exactly what they were saying. "This is Dr. Jiwoo Park, Kepler 442b Research Station, transmitting Vorthak tactical analysis and weakness profiles. Their bioweapons are vulnerable to neural implant frequencies, specifically 2.4 GHz range. Repeat, their bioweapons can be disrupted by standard military neural implant emissions." The message continued for several minutes, packed with technical data and tactical observations. As the transmission played, information began scrolling across Yonsu's tactical display. Detailed analysis of Vorthak shield frequencies, weapon system vulnerabilities, communication protocols, and most importantly, weaknesses in their terrifying bioweapon program. Major Woojin Seo, the ship's tactical officer, looked up from his computer with wide eyes. "Admiral, this is incredible. If this data is accurate, it could change everything. Our neural implants, every soldier, every pilot, every crew member has them. We've been carrying the solution to their bioweapons without even knowing it." Yonsu felt her heart racing as she studied the intelligence reports. For months, human forces had been helpless against Vorthak bioweapons, living creatures that could adapt to any defense, evolve new attack methods, and seem almost impossible to kill. But according to Dr. Park's research, these weapons had one critical weakness that no one had discovered. "The neural implant frequencies disrupt their adaptive capabilities," she said, reading the data aloud. "They can't evolve defenses against our own brain patterns." Commander Jinwoo Park looked confused as he checked his records. "Admiral, there's a problem. Kepler 442b Research Station was listed as destroyed 3 weeks ago. No survivors reported." Yonsu turned to stare at him, then back at the communications display, where Dr. Park's transmission was still coming through. The voice was getting weaker, and there were sounds of explosions and collapsing structures in the background. "Then someone made a very big mistake," she said grimly, her mind already working through the implications. "This woman and her team have been fighting alone for weeks, and they've just handed us the key to winning this war." The transmission ended abruptly, replaced by static. In the silence that followed, everyone in the command center realized they had just heard the last words of a hero who had sacrificed everything to give humanity one final chance at survival. The emergency fleet meeting took place in virtual reality, with holographic projections of ship commanders appearing around. Admiral Yonsu Kang in the Indomitable's war room. 47 captains from across the human fleet stared at her with expressions ranging from confusion to outright disbelief. Captain Unjung Moon of the heavy cruiser, Defiant, was the first to speak, her voice crackling through the communication system. "Admiral, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want to take our entire fleet, humanity's last major naval force, and attack the strongest Vorthak position in this sector." "That's exactly what I'm proposing," Yonsu replied, standing before the massive three-dimensional display that showed their current battle group. 47 ships hung in space like glittering jewels, everything from massive dreadnoughts to quick patrol vessels. It was the largest concentration of human military power left in the Outer Rim territories. Captain Do-hyun Kim of the destroyer. Swift Arrow shook his head. "With all due respect, Admiral, that's suicide. Our orders are clear. Retreat to Earth's defensive perimeter. We're supposed to be protecting the core worlds, not throwing our lives away on some rescue mission." Room erupted in arguments as other commanders voiced their concerns. They had all seen the tactical reports. The Vorthak had established a massive staging area around Kepler 442b, with hundreds of warships and orbital defense platforms. It was considered one of the most heavily defended positions in alien-controlled space. "Listen to me," Yonsu said, her voice cutting through the chatter. 3 weeks ago, we wrote off the Kepler 442b research station as destroyed. But Dr. Jiwoo Park and her team have been alive this entire time, fighting the Vorthak with nothing but their scientific knowledge and determination. She activated a recording of Dr. Park's transmission, letting the exhausted voice fill the virtual meeting room. As the tactical intelligence scrolled across their displays, she watched the expressions on her commanders' faces slowly change from skepticism to amazement. Commander Sung-Min Hong of the battleship Resolute was the first to understand the implications. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "If our neural implants can really disrupt their bioweapons—" "We've been fighting this war with one hand tied behind our backs," Yonsu continued. "Every soldier, every pilot, every crew member in this fleet has military-grade neural implants. We've been carrying the solution to their most dangerous weapons without even knowing it." Captain Moon still looked unconvinced. "Even if that's true, Admiral, we're talking about a 17-hour hyperspace jump directly into the heart of enemy territory. The tactical projections show we'd be outnumbered at least 5-1. The projections also show that we have advantages we never knew about," Yonsu replied. "Dr. Park's team has been studying these aliens for months. They've identified weaknesses in Vorthak shield systems, communication protocols, and tactical patterns. This isn't just a rescue mission, it's our best chance to strike a decisive blow against their entire invasion force." The virtual meeting room fell silent as the commanders absorbed this information. Everyone understood what was at stake. If they followed protocol and retreated to Earth, they would be abandoning not only Dr. Park's team, but also any chance of using the intelligence they had provided. Captain Ji-Hoon Lee of the assault carrier Thunderbolt spoke up from the back of the formation. "What about our families? Our homeworlds? If we lose this fleet, Earth's defenses will be critically weakened. If we don't use this intelligence now, there might not be any homeworlds left to defend," Yonsu replied grimly. "The Vorthak are building bioweapons at Kepler 442b that could make their entire fleet unstoppable. We have one chance to stop them before they complete their research." She looked around at the faces of her commanders, men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity. Dr. Park and her team have been holding that position for 3 weeks, waiting for help that they probably thought would never come. They've given us the key to victory, and now they're dying alone while we debate whether to save them. Commander, Hong pulled up the hyperspace navigation charts. 17 hours to reach Kepler 442b. We'd arrive with no element of surprise and limited tactical options. "Then we'd better get started," Yonsu replied, her voice carrying the authority of command. "No human gets left behind. Not on my watch." One by one, the ship commanders began nodding their agreement. It was an insane plan, but it was also their only hope. The fleet turned toward Kepler 442b. Hours had passed since Jiwoo's last transmission, and she had stopped believing that anyone would ever hear her message. The orbital bombardment continued overhead, turning the planet's surface into a hellscape of molten rock and toxic smoke. Every few minutes, another explosion would shake the deep caverns where she and her 2 surviving teammates had taken shelter. "Doctor." Hee Jin-song sat huddled against the cave wall, her scanner clutched in trembling hands. The device was almost dead, running on its last power cell, but she kept monitoring it anyway. It was the only thing that made her feel like she was still doing something useful instead of just waiting to die. Dr. Min-Ho Yoon lay unconscious on a makeshift bed of salvaged equipment. The symbiotic bonding with the stalker beast had changed him in ways none of them understood. His left arm was now completely covered in the biosynthetic webbing, and strange patterns of light pulsed beneath his skin. He was barely breathing, caught somewhere between human and something else entirely. "The surface temperature is over 800 degrees Celsius, Hyojin reported quietly, though her voice was so hoarse it was barely audible. Nothing could survive up there now. Jiwoo nodded, not trusting herself to speak. All around them, the cavern, walls showed scorch marks from the heat bleeding down from above. The stalker beasts that had become their unlikely allies were gone, either killed in the bombardment or fled to even deeper caves where humans couldn't follow. She thought about her team, Dr. Tae Hyun Choi with his brilliant young mind, Dr. So Min Kim, who had spent sleepless nights watching over the native creatures, Dr. Dong Hyun Nam, who had argued so passionately for fighting back. All of them were gone now, their sacrifice buying humanity just a few hours of intelligence data that probably no one would ever receive. "Contact," Heejin whispered suddenly, her voice filled with an emotion Jiwoo couldn't identify. "I'm reading multiple signatures dropping out of hyperspace." Jiwoo crawled over to look at the scanner display. expecting to see more Vorthak reinforcements, arriving to finish the job. Instead, her heart stopped beating for a moment as she recognized the energy signatures appearing on the screen. Human ships. Dozens of them. 47 warships materialized in perfect attack formation around Kepler 442b, their weapons already charging and their shields at full power. The largest vessel, a massive dreadnought that could only be humanity's flagship, took position at the center of the formation like a protective mother surrounded by her children. "That's impossible," Jiwoo whispered, watching the tactical display with tears streaming down her face. "They can't be here." The Outer Rim territories were abandoned. The Vorthak fleet, caught completely off guard by the sudden appearance of human forces, scrambled to respond. Alien ships that had been lazily orbiting the planet suddenly powered up their weapons and began moving into defensive positions. But they were too late. The human fleet had arrived with the element of surprise and a tactical advantage the aliens couldn't have expected. "UES Indomitable to surface team," came a clear, strong voice over their emergency communication channel. "This is Admiral Yeon-Soo Kang. We received your message, Dr. Park. Sorry we're late to the party." Jiwoo grabbed the communicator with shaking hands, hardly believing that she was hearing another human voice after so many weeks of isolation. "Admiral, how did you... We thought everyone had retreated." "No human gets left behind, Doctor," came the reply. "Your intelligence data is already being used by our weapons systems. Every ship in this fleet has been recalibrated based on your research. Now sit tight while we clean house." The battle that followed was unlike anything Jiwoo had ever witnessed. Through her scanner, she watched as human weapons, now calibrated to exploit every weakness she had discovered, tore through Vorthak defenses like they were made of paper. The aliens' bioweapons, which had seemed unstoppable for so long, simply shut down when exposed to the neural implant frequencies that every human soldier carried. Vorthak shields collapsed under focused fire, their communication networks jammed. By interference patterns Jiwoo's team had mapped, and their tactical formations disrupted by attacks they couldn't predict or counter. Within 2 hours, the massive alien staging area was nothing but scattered debris floating in space. The bioweapon facility where so many creatures had been tortured and experimented on was completely destroyed, along with years of alien research and development. As Jiwoo watched the explosions light up the planet's orbit, she finally allowed herself to believe that they had won. Humanity had come back for them. The rescue shuttle descended through the smoke and ash that still filled Kepler 442b's atmosphere. Its hull bore the personal insignia of Admiral Yeon-Soo Kang, a silver eagle clutching a star, the symbol of humanity's naval command. The pilot had to navigate carefully through the debris field that had once been the Vorthak staging area, dodging chunks of destroyed alien warships that now drifted lifeless in orbit. Dr. Jiwoo Park heard the engines long before she saw the lights. After weeks of hiding in caves, listening only to the sounds of bombardment and destruction, the gentle hum of human technology felt like a miracle. She tried to stand up to greet her rescuers, but her legs gave out immediately. Exhaustion, dehydration, and injuries had taken their toll. The rescue team found them in the deepest part of the cavern system, 3 survivors huddled around the dying embers of their last emergency heat source. Dr. Hyejin Song was semi-conscious, mumbling about scanner readings and creature patterns. Dr. Min Ho Yoon was the most changed. The symbiotic bonding with the stalker beast had transformed his entire left side, but somehow it had also kept him alive when he should have died days ago. "Ma'am, we've got them," the rescue team leader reported into his communicator. 3 survivors, all alive but in need of immediate medical attention. Admiral Kang herself stepped into the cavern, her uniform crisp and her bearing confident, despite having just fought one of the largest space battles in human history. She looked around at the makeshift shelter where Jiwoo's team had made their last stand, taking in the salvaged equipment, the improvised weapons, and the scientific instruments that had somehow kept working through everything. "Status report." "Doctor," she said, as her medics carefully loaded Jiwoo onto a floating stretcher. Jiwoo's voice was barely a whisper, but she forced herself to give a complete briefing. "The bioweapon program is completely destroyed. All their research facilities, all their test subjects, all their data. The intelligence packages I transmitted should contain everything you need: frequency vulnerabilities, shield weaknesses, communication protocols. The neural implant countermeasures should work across their entire fleet. Admiral Kang walked alongside the stretcher as they moved toward the shuttle. They're already working, Doctor. Your data has been transmitted to Earth Command, and every human ship in the galaxy is being retrofitted with new weapon systems based on your discoveries. The Vorthak Empire's main advantage has been neutralized. As the shuttle lifted off from the planet's surface, Jiwoo pressed her face against the small window to watch Kepler 442b fall away below them. The planet looked different now, scarred by bombardment, its forests burned, its mountains melted into glass. But it wasn't dead. Through her scanner, she could detect life signs moving in the deeper wilderness areas. Some of the stalker beasts had survived, hidden in caves and underground rivers, where even orbital bombardment couldn't reach them. "Will they remember?" she asked quietly. "Remember what?" Admiral Kang replied, settling into the seat beside her. "That humans fought alongside them, that we tried to protect them from the Vorthak." The Admiral looked out at the planet's surface, where the first green shoots of new growth were already beginning to emerge from the ash. "I think they will. Intelligence isn't just about survival, it's about memory, about learning from experience. Those creatures will remember that some aliens came to destroy, but others came to help." The shuttle docked with the UES Indomitable, and Jiwoo found herself aboard humanity's flagship for the first time in her life. The ship was enormous, its corridors filled with thousands of crew members who had just won an impossible victory. As they passed through the medical bay, she could see wounded soldiers being treated, but also celebrations and reunions as families were reunited with loved ones who had been given up for dead. "We came back for you," Admiral Kang said quietly as the medical team prepared to take Jiwoo into surgery. "No matter what the cost, no matter how dangerous the mission, we don't abandon our people. That's what makes us human." Jiwoo closed her eyes and finally allowed herself to believe that they had won. Not just the battle, but something much more important: the war for humanity's soul.